A community in shock as tragedy strikes Florida State University.
A gunman opened fire on the main campus of Florida State University in Tallahassee, shooting multiple individuals in the vicinity of the Student Union building. FSU police responded immediately, engaged, neutralized, and apprehended the shooter.
Here's what we know. The gunman opening fire at 11:50 this morning, leaving 2 people dead and 5 people injured. The suspect is now in custody in the hospital. That alleged shooter is the son of a sheriff's deputy, and the investigation is still ongoing. President Donald Trump addressing the shooting in the Oval Office earlier today, saying he continues to be briefed on the situation. We will go live from the White House with more on that in just moments. And this all comes as the Trump administration's fight over a controversial deportation case is being played out in the media. A judge rejecting an appeal to facilitate the return of Kilmar Abrego Garcia, a suspected MS-13 gang member detained in El Salvador.
You'll have to speak to the lawyers, the DOJ. I've heard many things about him, and we'll have to find out what the truth is. We have activist judges that don't want murderers to be sent out of our country.
And we start tonight with that terrible shooting in Tallahassee at FSU, where the suspect is now in the hospital. Witnesses describing the scene from earlier today.
As I was running, I did hear a couple of gunshots. I hid behind some bushes for about a couple of minutes of a couple of other people nearby, and then I started hearing several rounds of additional gunshots.
I went to a little cubby space, and then you just look down at your phone, look at the news, and like start to process it. Like, damn, people just got shot a couple feet away from me.
Well, joining us now to talk more is Charles Marino. He's a former Secret Service special agent and former Homeland Security Department advisor. Charles, thank you so much for sharing your insight tonight. So the threat we know is mitigated. The suspect is in the hospital. What's law enforcement doing right now?
Well, right now they're trying to piece all of this together. As you know, it's a very dynamic situation, not only upon the initial response and information coming to law enforcement to identify the location and identity of the shooter to neutralize the threat, but also to put the pieces together afterwards. This is a horrific story and will ultimately come down to 2 things, as most of these cases usually do, and that is mental health and access to weapons. Here we've got even further disturbing details about access to weapons. The son of a former, deputy sheriff in the area. And this leads to a lot of questions. Why were those weapons not secured properly? And did this individual, the shooter, have any mental health issues? Which I think we will find the answer will be yes.
Yeah, the horror to all of this, and just trying to put yourself in the shoes of the students who would have been going through all of this and being told initially to shelter in place until the threat was gone. Talk to us a little bit about campus safety. Well, if we can bring up the maps of everything so we can sort of get a lay of the land, and if you're just joining us tonight and learning of this for the first time. But how could this have happened, Charles?
Well, you know, you've got a college campus, very large in an urban setting. It's very easy, especially if those shots, as reported, were coming from outside of buildings. You've heard the reporting about the suspect in an orange Hummer vehicle and shooting from the street towards the buildings at students and others that were located outside of these facilities. So this can happen anywhere. What we had was a robust multi-jurisdictional response there amongst agencies that work closely together each and every day. You've got Florida State University, again, a large university with their own police department. You've got the city of Tallahassee Police Department, the local sheriff's department, and because it's the capital of Florida, you also have state law enforcement there. So all of these agencies work together, trained together, responded together, and went right towards the reported threat to neutralize this. This obviously could have been much, much worse, but we see that we had a rapidly moving threat. We now know this based on the reporting of a motor vehicle. You've got 9 buildings right now on the campus that have been categorized as crime scenes. So this tells us how quickly the shooter was moving about outside of this campus.
Right, and he knew where he was going to. He knew the lay of the land. Do you feel like we need to do more to harden soft targets? We're talking about a university tonight. Who knows? Hopefully we don't start reporting on copycats down the track, at a high school or an elementary school. It's just sickening. Do we need to do more to harden these soft targets?
It's tough. When we're talking about buildings, we have not heard reporting that the shooter accessed the building, which is a good thing. But what I can tell you is campus security is usually controlled as a holistic environment, but yet you've got to treat each of these buildings as individual sites and secure the access and also have the capable monitoring to see what's going on and around. I think all of the universities that I've got experience with are doing a very good job, especially in this heightened threat environment, to do that. But again, we're talking about public areas where a shooter can engage anybody outside, and it's very tough to control. All you can hope for, as was the case here, is a very rapid and robust law enforcement response to this. The bigger question, Anna, is what more can we do on the front end to identify these problems, make sure that these problems don't have access to weapons? And I think we've got to pull in social media to this with all of the algorithms that they're able to create on the front end for things like shopping. We should no longer have to hear that we've got to go to social media to piece these shootings together in the aftermath. We should be able to do this on the front end.
Right, because these shooters often do leave breadcrumbs that we then find and go, oh yeah, hindsight is 20/20, and perhaps it could have been prevented. Well, we did learn that the suspect had access to his mother's weapons. What more do we know about the weapon used?
Well, it appears that it was a handgun. We did not get confirmation as to whether or not there was a long gun. You've heard reports of a shotgun, possibly a rifle. We have not heard much about that coming out of the press conferences. What we have heard is that a handgun was used that was formerly a service weapon of his mother, being an employee of the sheriff's department. And then as they transitioned to newer handguns, this then went into a personal weapon category for the deputy sheriff, the mother of the shooter. And that is the weapon he had access to.
And once again, 2 dead and 5 injured, and the suspect is in the hospital. 6, actually, in the hospital, including the shooter. Charles Marino, thank you so much.
Thanks, Anna.
All right, and our Robert Sherman is live at the White House with reaction from the president this evening. Robert, what more can you tell us?
Hey there, Anna. And the president has been briefed on today's events at Florida State and says he's watching the situation closely. Just moments ago, in an executive order signing in the Oval Office, he described it as a shame and a horrible thing to have happened. And the federal government is putting resources in motion to assist with the response. FBI Director Kash Patel announcing his agents are on the ground in Tallahassee assisting local law enforcement. You may recall during President Trump's last term, he had to lead the nation through several mass shooting events, including the shooting of Marjory Stoneman Douglas High School in Parkland, Florida, the 2017 shooting in Las Vegas. And during his first presidency, he pushed for certain gun laws on things like bump stocks, encouraged legislators to look into raising the minimum age to purchase firearms. Our own Libby Dean asking the president about that in the Oval Office moments ago. Take a listen.
There are now 2 deceased following that shooting at Florida State University. Following and amid that, is there any changes that you want to see to gun legislation? Anything you see broken with gun laws in our country?
I'm going to have to look. I'm a big advocate of the Second Amendment. I have been from the beginning. I protected it, and these things are terrible. But the gun doesn't do the shooting. The people do. As far as legislation is concerned, this has been going on for a long time. I have an obligation to protect the Second Amendment.
And the president telling us he will be saying more about the shooting in Florida as the situation and investigation develops. Anna?
All right. And Robert, President Trump also met with Italy's prime minister today. What did we hear from that meeting?
Yeah, I mean, the big focus on that, Anna, trade and tariffs, with the Italian prime minister being an ally of President Trump, but effectively representing the EU today, which has drawn the ire of President Trump, particularly over automotive tariffs, the value-added tax as well, with the president saying today that despite some of those differences in the past, he feels confident he'll be able to strike a deal with the EU, as well as other countries such as China. His trade team remaining very confident, saying there's still over 15 deals that they've put on the table, and they think they're going to continue making progress on that front over the next few weeks. Anna?
All right, great reporting there for us. NewsNation's Robert Sherman live here at the White House. Thank you so much. All right, and coming up on the Hill, more on the shooting at Florida State University, how one actor from The Sopranos is teaming up with a security tech company to help deal with school shootings. I'm going to be talking to him live. And an exclusive report from the border. Our Allie Bradley gets a tour of what Border Patrol calls cartel territory. We'll show you the tense moments when drug traffickers confronted our NewsNation team. Stay with us. You're watching The Hill.
20-year-old Phoenix Eichner. And he's the son of a Leon County Sheriff deputy. Unfortunately, her son had access to one of her weapons, and that was one of the weapons that was found at the scene.
That's police, law enforcement there just a short time ago, providing an update on the shooting at Florida State University in Tallahassee. And tonight, 2 people are dead and 6 are hurt, including the shooter who was in the hospital. The 2 killed are not students. And as you just heard from police, the shooter has been identified as the son of a Leon County Sheriff's deputy. The shooter apparently gained access to one of his mother's guns. Joining us now to talk more is Joe Ganascoli. He's a spokesperson for XSponse, an artificial intelligence security system that provides detection and alert notifications during emergency situations, specifically school shootings. And you may also recognize him as an actor from The Sopranos. Joe, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Anna.
So how do you rate the university's response so far from what you've been able to glean from media reports?
Well, I guess they responded as quickly and as best they could. I don't know how long it took them to get there. I seemed pretty quick, but they did the best they could, and I was in that situation.
All right. Well, I was just scrolling through our story coverage here on NewsNation because we, of course, were watching this as the details were unfolding as well. And the school sent out several emergency alerts to students there. And they said they would be using a safe word, seminal. They were telling everybody to shelter in place and that law enforcement would use the word seminal if it was clear for them to open up the door and they would then be safe. But we believe what we're learning is that this shooter, they believe he was a student. So he presumably would have gotten the same email. How dangerous is that?
There's so many things that you have to factor in these situations, and new problems, I guess, arise. That's one of the great things that, since I started working with XSponse, that their technology is able to do.
Right. So if you can tell us, how does XSponse work? And do you know, is FSU using your technology?
I don't believe it's fairly new. It's a really cutting edge technology.
Okay.
And I don't know, or I doubt if they are, but this XSponse allows like one button could be worn on the lanyard with teachers or whoever security in the building. And then there's like a base model that's attached to a wall. So pushing that button, because when a situation arises, it's human nature to freeze and forget what you're supposed to do. So
Right.
Pushing one button, automatic door becomes locked. First responders are notified, cameras are activated, there's speakers involved, and it really helps everyone to the situation, locating perhaps a shooter, or perhaps it's not a shooting. Maybe there's a student going, allergic reaction that needs attention, or maybe drugs involved. But, for shootings, it's just everything happens in once, and I don't think that anything that's out there like it.
Right. Well, it's great technology. How do we get it in more schools, especially when folks are dealing with these budgets, right? How expensive is it, and what's the timeline do you think that schools could start to use your technology?
Well, I think that it's, again, fairly new. I think it's very affordable, and with government grants and working with, one of our spokespersons that both of them, Ryan Petty and Andrew Pollack, had unfortunately lost children in Parkland shooting. And so they work very closely with the president, and he is a big proponent of school safety. And so grants are available, and they make it affordable because ultimately it's to help parents and kids.
Yeah, well, we will continue looking into it. Joe Gianniscoli, thank you so much for your time. Joe from X-Spots, appreciate it.
You're very welcome. Thank you.
And there's still a whole lot more ahead tonight on the Hill. Dramatic moments along the border as the cartel confronts our own NewsNation team. Our Allie Bradley joins us from the border with an exclusive report. And a judicial showdown over the deportation of migrants to El Salvador. A judge threatens to hold Trump officials in contempt. So what happens next? A senior advisor to Border Patrol joins us live when the Hill returns. And the question many are asking tonight is the case of Kilmar Abrego Garcia heading to the Supreme Court. He's the suspected MS-13 gang member. A judge ordered the Trump administration to facilitate his return to the United States from El Salvador after the White House initially admitted that Abrego Garcia was wrongly deported. The White House holding its ground on the case, though, saying that he will not ever be coming back to the United States. The administration can now seek emergency relief from the Supreme Court. President Trump distancing himself from the matter earlier today.
If the court holds you in contempt, will you take steps to return Kilmar Abrego Garcia to the United States and put him in front of a judge?
Well, I'm not involved in it. I'm going to respond by saying you'll have to speak to the lawyers, the DOJ. I've heard many things about him, and we'll have to find out what the truth is.
Well, the administration is also criticizing those who insist calling Abrego Garcia a, quote, Maryland man or a loving father rather than alleged violent criminal. So Attorney General Pam Bondi releasing the 2019 filing showing this. It states that Garcia was identified as a member of MS-13 who admitted to illegally crossing the border near McAllen, Texas back in 2012. We'll be speaking with Ron Vitello, a senior advisor at U.S. Customs and Border Protection, in just a bit on what the administration is going to be doing next. But first, let's head to Allie Bradley in Roma, Texas. So, Allie, you have an exclusive report for us on cartels at the southern border. Good evening to you.
Yeah, hey, good evening, Anna. So we were actually out on an exclusive ride-along with Border Patrol down here in the Rio Grande Valley sector, specifically where we are here in Roma, Texas, where they tell us that the cartel is controlling any illicit activity that's happening in this area. They control who and what crosses where on a daily basis. And while we were out there, we were actually in their way. While we were on boats with them, we were essentially on the cartel's turf, if you will. So while we were out there, these suspected cartel members began throwing rocks at us while we were on these Border Patrol boats. And they were actually at one of these houses that Border Patrol has said is a smuggling location, is one of these spots that's a scout house for, you can see on the side of it in black spray paint, it says CDG. That's Cartel de Golfo, or the Gulf Cartel. So while we were standing out there, a wave of people surged the riverbanks and they took a very aggressive posture towards the Border Patrol boats. Take a listen to what Border Patrol had to say about this incident.
It is something that we have seen in this area, and a rock is considered a deadly weapon.
Everybody knows about the Gulf Cartel.
That in itself lets you know the location that we're at, how we have to be a little more vigilant in those areas. It can be something, them trying to do, you know, a scare tactic on us, right? Something to show their presence, that they're there, and obviously they've come out of that house that has that lettering on it.
Now, Agent Smallwood tells us that they are seeing an increase in cartel activity when it comes to narcotics, like fentanyl being smuggled both between the ports in these areas and also at the ports, because the cartel just isn't making the money that they used to by moving thousands of people into the U.S. illegally. Now, the reason that CDG Scout House is in what Border Patrol says is essentially the perfect spot. As you take our cameras live here, you can see where the proximity of that kind of Scout House is to this island here. So all they have to do is cross the river there, end up on that island, which essentially becomes kind of a safe harbor for these cartel members, for their illicit activities. They send up drones, they use scouts, they use people to figure out when the coast is clear, when Border Patrol is no longer there, and then they send the drugs and the people over into the U.S. illegally. And Anna, while we were out on the boats, the people over on the south side, the suspected cartel members, were yelling profanities at our crews. They were mocking the Border Patrol. So it was definitely interesting, and Border Patrol got to it very quickly. They got their rifles on hand. They protected us very quickly because that is their priority, Anna. So thankfully, everybody was safe in that incident as well, Anna.
And you've just done tireless reporting down there at the border. NewsNation's Allie Bradley, you've been down there for several years. Great reporting as usual. Thanks so much. And now live here in the studio, we have retired acting ICE director and senior advisor at U.S. Customs and Border Protection, Ron Vitello. Great to meet you in person after talking to you so many times on satellite from New York on the weekend during my show. So as we see, we've got Border Czar Tom Homan and DHS Secretary Kristi Noem really making good on President Trump's campaign promises to secure the border. Are we going to continue to see the cartels get more creative and adapt and change?
That's the work at the border, right? Even with this leadership, even with almost nearly 100% less activity at the southwest border, there's a lot going on that's good on behalf of the operations down there, but this is what we're going to have to watch out for, that threat that exists in border communities at the river. So I'm glad the front line's out there. I'm glad you all are exposing it, but this is what we're going to be vigilant about, making sure that if the cartels are out of the human smuggling business in a dramatic way, like with a 100% drop in activity, then they're going to find a way to make money somehow. And so we need to be vigilant in these locations on the near coasts, like places like Brownsville and San Diego. We've got to be mindful of tunnels. And then the cartels have no responsibility to play by any rules. They set the rules, they set the agenda. And so drones and overhead and tunnels, and those are the things that will be the work of the Border Patrol. But we can be assured that there's more of us, more agents on the ground, more capability being brought to bear on the border because of the lower levels of activity that are there.
And NewsNation has these exclusive pictures to show you. Let's go ahead and talk about the news of the day and this Kilmar Abrego Garcia, this alleged MS-13 gang member. We're watching the spat play out in the media between Republicans and Democrats on this one. Here's what Democrats have been saying. Take a listen.
The constitutional crisis is here.
What's happening right now, for people to understand, is a constitutional crisis.
Donald Trump does not have a right to ignore legally obtained court orders, and if he does not comply, then he is heading towards a constitutional crisis.
I mean, I can't count how many times I've heard that. Is that alarmism? Is that truth? Are we headed toward a constitutional crisis with this?
I think it's over-indexed. I think what happened here is this individual made choices. They came into the country illegally. He's been a known gang member. He has a criminal activity in his background, maybe not convictions, but he was deported based on the fact that he was in this country illegally, was set up for a hearing in front of an immigration judge, was ordered deported by that judge, appealed that hearing, and was ordered. The government won that appeal, so he was removed based on the current situation that we see at the border now.
Okay, and what do you make of Senator Christopher Van Hollen going to El Salvador yesterday? There's a whole host of other Democrats who have put their names out there saying they would like to go and do the same thing to try to bring him home, as they say, and Republicans are saying he is home. This is where he's from. He's not coming back to the United States. But what do you make of the optics of that?
Well, let's start where it is operationally. If he comes back to the United States, he's going to be deported again. So this seems to me more like grandstanding than anything else, right? We're going to El Salvador. He's negotiating with the government. That's what the president is supposed to do. In fact, in the court ruling, it says that this is foreign policy to be conducted by the executive branch. And we're going to be where we are at after these rulings for being deported. That's where this ends up. He's a native son of El Salvador. If the roles were reversed, if there was an American citizen in jail in the United States that did something in El Salvador that they were concerned about, if they asked us to send a native son of America to El Salvador just because they asked us to, we wouldn't do that either.
All right. It seems like President Trump is letting Pam Bondi do the talking. He seems to be distancing himself a little bit, not just from Kilmar Abrego Garcia, but all of these deportations of the alleged gang members that are now in that max security prison there. Do you think he's distancing himself? And if so, why?
I don't think he's distancing himself. He's given the tools to people like Pam Bondi and Kristi Noem and the front line of DHS. The intent is clear. Secure the border, make America safe again. That's ongoing. Now, obviously, there's a legal situation here. The less people say about it, the better off we're going to be.
All right. Now, the president also sounding off today on the judge's decision to block the deportations of 530,000 migrants given temporary status under Biden. So is this going to be potentially slowing things down? President Trump said it's going to take 100 years if he follows the letter of the law the way that it is right now, or this procedure anyway.
Well, leadership and the front line are going to continue to do what we're doing, right? Continue to secure the border, engage it in a situation that allows us to have situational awareness, eventually operational control. So we're going to keep doing that on the border. We see our brethren in ICE going into the interior, getting the worst of the worst. All of those things are going to continue. The abuse of parole, the out-of-control border that happened in the last administration needs to be responded to, and this is part and parcel of that.
All right. And do you think more people, when they see headlines like this, are going to start self-deporting?
Well, we already see the evidence of that, right? The CBP home app, people are raising their hand inside the application to request a ride home.
All right, that's what we want. All right, Ron Vitello, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Great stuff. All right, 35 minutes after the hour, coming up on the Hill, the fight against the Fed. Trump slams the man in charge of the country's money policy.
I don't think he's doing the job. He's too late, always too late, really slow, and I'm not happy with him.
Can Trump fire Jerome Powell, who's head of the Federal Reserve? And what would happen if he did? Our full panel joins us after the break.
All this week, tragedies that shocked America. Waco, Oklahoma City, Columbine, Virginia Tech, the Boston Marathon. Banfield remembers the heartbreaking stories all this week.
We're in a time and a place where I don't know, I certainly have not been here before. And I'll tell you, I'm oftentimes very anxious myself about using my voice, because retaliation is real, and that's not right.
Well, welcome back to the Hill. I'm Anna Koyman, filling in for Blake Berman. And that was Senator Lisa Murkowski with a strong statement describing a culture of fear among politicians as well as federal workers. Trepidation of President Trump and daring to express an opinion that differs from his agenda for fear of retribution. Those in the Trump administration, as well as loyalists on Capitol Hill, might argue that this is not about retribution. It's just politics, and politics is just a dirty game. In a message to fellow Republicans, Senator Tommy Tuberville minced no words in expressing this exact sentiment. Here's what Tuberville said when he heard criticism of some of Trump's cabinet picks inside their own party.
What's surprising to me is that I'm hearing grumblings from Republicans. My advice to them is get on board or get out of the way.
Well, someone else who, according to President Trump, might be in his way, Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell, over these comments about the negative impacts of Trump's tariffs.
Trade now is the focus, and the effects of that are likely to move us away from our goals. So unemployment is likely to go up as the economy slows in all likelihood, and inflation is likely to go up as tariffs find their way, and some part of those tariffs come to be paid by the public.
And the president lashing out at Powell earlier today as mortgage rates are climbing to the highest level in roughly 2 months. Rates now sitting just under 7%. This is down half a percentage point, though, from a year ago. So does Trump regret nominating Powell in his first term? Our Kelly Meyer asked the president just that.
Look, in the first 4 years, we had the greatest economy in the history of our country. Stock market went up 88 points. I think he's terrible, but I can't complain because we had the most successful administration economically in the history of our country.
Well, I want to hear what our panel thinks, don't you? We're going to talk about all this and more. T.W. Origi, former communications aide to Republican Senator Lindsey Graham. Naveen Nayak, president of the Center for American Progress Action Fund. Tiffany Smiley, former Republican Senate candidate and state of Washington. And Dan Cannon, former Battleground States Director for the Biden and Harris campaigns. Well, welcome, panel. Great to see you.
Good to see you.
All right, so what do you think, TW? I'll start with you. All this offense that we're seeing from Trump, is this personal retribution that he's trying to take out? Is it just politics as usual? What is it?
I think it's a bit of just politics. Look, this isn't unusual for a president to flex his muscle with candidates for any office. My mind is drawn to Rahm Emanuel for Barack Obama was sort of the hammer. It's not unusual for there to be a hammer for a president. It's just unusual for the president to be his own hammer. A poll came out yesterday showing 1% of Trump voters would have changed their vote. 1%. That's none. So why is that the case? Because he's doing what he said he was going to do. So yes, is it unusual, at least in modern times, that the president is so aggressive to senators to get in line or congressmen to get in line? Sure. But Lisa Murkowski will be good in Alaska. It's a quirky state. She won a write-in campaign with the last name Murkowski. I think she should be okay.
What's unusual, though?
Yeah, Dan, I want you to weigh in.
What's unusual here is the president in the Oval Office signing executive orders targeting law firms that disagreed with him. Law firms. Signing executive orders targeting individual former staffers who wrote a book he didn't like. Going after schools, governors, political opponents, anyone he does not agree with, and using the IRS or the Justice Department in a persecuted kind of way. That is very unusual and disturbing. And what Senator Murkowski is saying is spot on. And here's the thing about her that you should know.
Okay.
I happen to work with her a lot on Alaska issues. I'm often on the opposite side of her on important stuff for my clients and fighting her as a political opponent, but never as an enemy. She is principled. She is someone who listens to her constituents. They respect her greatly. And even those that are on the other side of the aisle and disagree with her on the politics understand her to be someone that cares deeply. And what you saw in that clip was someone who was genuine, who was being, I think, emotionally affected by the politics at this moment, but very, very measured. And I want to point that out. She was very measured there. This is not reactionary.
Tiffany, but is she worried about being primary? You know, Trump won Alaska handily. What do you make of all of that?
You know, if she was so principled, then she should really be focusing on ways to work with President Trump and his policies that actually serve Alaskans, from energy dominance to border security and safety. And look, we live in a country where a sitting Republican senator undermines the same party affiliate president for 8 years, undermines his agenda for 8 years, and still publicly comes out and talks against him. She is not afraid at all. Let's not forget that we live in the United States of America, and I would really love to see her to find ways of partnering and delivering results for the American people.
I mean, your turn. How can Democrats strike the right tone of resistance against Trump?
Well, listen, I think one of the things that's changed a lot from 2017 is that the Republican Party is actually lockstep behind Donald Trump. If Lisa Murkowski were really concerned, she voted for every single one but one of Donald Trump's cabinet nominees. If she's afraid, she is one of 100 senators. Of course, she has way more power and way more control. I think the thing that has been missing, there's two things that have changed. One is the Republican Party is lockstep. Lisa Murkowski in the old times would have actually expressed something, done something. And Donald Trump was actually popular a few months ago. He's not anymore. I think that poll you referenced was a poll of Donald Trump because all of the other
CNN.
There's no chance Trump voters.
CNN.
Donald Trump's numbers are upside down. No, the Democratic brand is terrible, but it is absolutely a farce to think that Donald Trump, he's the most unpopular president ever.
Take it up with CNN.
Other than Donald
Half the
Trump.
country voted for Donald Trump and 1% would change their mind.
Are we ready to talk the Federal Reserve and Jerome Powell? Well, I want us to take a listen to Senator Elizabeth Warren. She says the markets could really absolutely take a dive if this all turns into an Apprentice episode. Listen.
Understand this. If Chairman Powell can be fired by the President of the United States, it will crash the markets in the United States.
TW, what do you think?
Yeah, the market will tumble if he does that. Look, two things can be true at the same time. You can say that Donald Trump's criticism is right, that he's often late, and that's a critique that's come from the right and the left, both to raise rates and lower them. And you can also say that Trump wants him gone, in large part because part of the impetus of these taxes in Trump's mind is onshoring, right? And if there is a spike in inflation at all, people are going to be tighter with their pocketbooks to invest and to expend capital. So if we can make rates more attractive to fund the onshoring projects, the new developments, you're going to want that. Now, but he's had those concerns forever.
Well, look, and we can't forget that Trump actually nominated Jerome Powell during his first term. Dan, what do you make of it?
I think if he screws around with Jerome Powell, he's really screwing around with the world economy in a way that is unbelievable at this point. The markets are already telling him, hands off tariff. This is killing our sense of stability and investment. It's killing the sense that we have an ability to actually have a plan to do that onshoring. And if TW is right and that's what he wants to do, where's the plan to actually create that investment? It doesn't exist. You can't just build the wall and then not build anything on your side. And if Jerome Powell doesn't respond to what Trump is doing, we are going to crater into a recession and inflation. He's his own worst enemy if he's going after Jerome Powell.
Tiffany, how big of a deal is this rift?
Yeah, he's not going after Jerome Powell. I mean, they're posturing, and let's be honest, the markets like stability and predictability. I think they overreacted completely. President Trump knows this. He knows that his tariffs worked. He talked about it in the clip that we just watched. His tariffs built a strong economy in his first term. In fact, there was a 2024 survey that showed that his tariffs did build a stronger economy and worked on reshoring. So that's what he's focused on, and that's what's happening. I think there's going to be some volatility and some up and downs, but people have to hold on. Like, we were headed down a path of bankruptcy and ruin to the point that something needed to be done, and that's what the American people voted for.
Yeah, well, it's a very scary time for small business owners who have, product that they've paid for or that they've got invoices that they need to pay with merchandise coming in. They don't know if they're going to be able to pay it with these massive tariffs. Naveen, I'm going to let you have the final word on this.
Well, listen, I think this is actually turning into Trump's Achilles heel. The economy was one of the reasons he got reelected. Voters didn't like a lot about Donald Trump, but they thought he was going to be good on the economy. We've seen the lowest consumer sentiment. We have seen his job approval on the economy absolutely go inverted. That was the one thing in all of his first term. Donald Trump almost never had negative job approval on the economy. He is so unpopular on the economy, minus 20 points with independents, many of whom voted for him. And so that is the real problem here. And the other thing I'd say, which gets to the other conversations, everything Donald Trump does is about exercising power. The Murkowski story is about people trying to react to a president who is pushing the bounds of the president's power. Same thing here. He knows he cannot fire Jerome Powell, not only for economic reasons, but for legal ones. But he's going to push the boundaries, just like your earlier stories
and
tonight.
Let it play out in the media as well. All right, panel, thank you so much. Stay here. We'll talk to you more after the break. Coming up on the Hill, Israel has its Iron Dome, and Trump wants one for the United States. Why he may tap Elon Musk for the job. The full panel returns to talk about that. And coming up on Elizabeth Vargas Report, she will continue with breaking news coverage of the shooting there at Florida State University. That's coming up at 7 o'clock Eastern right here on NewsNation. Elon Musk could soon be taking on another role inside the federal government. Reuters are reporting Musk's SpaceX is emerging as the front runner to build the Golden Dome missile shield. SpaceX pitching a subscription model for the Golden Dome where the government would have to pay to access the defense system rather than owning it. A Golden Dome defense system was one of President Trump's campaign promises, you remember, modeling it after Israel's renowned Iron Dome system. He emphasized strengthening the U.S. military back in his joint address to Congress last month.
As Commander-in-Chief, my focus is on building the most powerful military of the future. As a first step, I'm asking Congress to fund a state-of-the-art Golden Dome missile defense shield to protect our homeland, all made in the USA.
So the Pentagon has bids from more than 180 companies, we're learning, including Lockheed Martin, Boeing, and Northrop Grumman. Some experts believe the total cost could be hundreds of billions of dollars. So should Elon Musk and SpaceX spearhead the next project? Full panel back with us now. Naveen, is Elon Musk the front runner because of his proximity to Trump?
Yes, his proximity, and I think it was $300 million in political contributions. I think this is exactly what the American people find really repelling, is that Donald Trump's biggest donor is actually cashing in on the investment he made in Donald Trump. And it's candidly, particularly what Donald Trump promised he wouldn't do. Remember all the talk of swamps? Apparently, he's very comfortable making D.C. very swampy.
Tiffany, conflicts of interest here? No, look, Elon is the greatest innovator of our time, and he's the richest man in the world for a reason. He has totally innovated our news and media with X. He's innovated our cars with Tesla. He's innovated our space now with SpaceX. So there's no reason to not think that he would be a front runner for this job. This is what the American people voted for: efficiency, our best and brightest. Why would we not want the best at the front, protecting our generations to come in this country?
Dan, quick beat.
So maybe that's right. Maybe this is the best bid possible, and if SpaceX can do this better than anyone else, that's fine. But you can't be the government contractor and then also be the person that audits government contracts. Pick one or the other. You can't be the fox in the hen house. If he wants to do this kind of work, bid appropriately.
I heard David Petraeus say that we don't have an military industrial complex. We don't have enough of one. Elon Musk is miles ahead of the other billionaire companies in this field. We need more people competing for these contracts. It'll be better. Elon Musk has had a lot of roles in the military. Starlink gave internet to Ukraine. It's a good thing. I hope they spread it out and we get more competition.
But shouldn't we own it, not him?
Yeah.
I'm okay with that.
Hopefully the bromance continues, though, because we don't want to see that could certainly fizzle, which everybody's watching for as well. Guys, thank you so much, and gal as well. Yeah. Nice to have everybody, and thank you so much to everybody at home for joining us. I'm Anna Koyman, once again filling in for Blake Berman, and coming up tonight and right after this, Elizabeth Vargas reports she's going to take things now from New York City. Have a great evening.